Alright, so I just got 32nd place at regionals this past weekend, and I managed to get my invite to nationals just barely. The top 32 people managed to qualify for Nats, so I just got it by the skin of my teeth. I went 5-2-1, and I had good tiebreakers because 3 out of the 8 people that had that record uh, managed to qualify. So I'm really happy about that. All I really wanted was to qualify for Nats. I haven't played since like December, January maybe. But yeah, I didn't play it at all until that event, and I hadn't played this particular deck since the summer. So I played Paleo Frogs because I couldn't play Pendulum Magicians anymore because they hit the old stuff and released new cards, and I didn't have the new cards, and there's no way I'm spending like $70 to get an Electromite because that's way too much money. I feel like that card is totally overpriced, even if it's the best deck. So yeah, I just played Frogs because I didn't have to get anything to play the deck, and I could have used some of the expensive links in the deck, but you don't need them, so that's why I play this deck basically. Also, I just as a note, I don't have my tripod here with me, so I'll try to keep this as steady as I can while going through the deck profile. So apologize for that. It's a little bit lower quality than I usually have. So anyways, going into the deck profile, we've got the basic frog engine. So we got 3 swap frogs, and then we've got 3 dupe frogs, and we have 2 Ronin Totems. So yeah, that's the 8 card frog engine that everybody plays, and it works great. They're all really good for what they do. No reason to run anything different. And then we've also got 3 Gradle Slime Juniors. So shout out to my friend Ked for suggesting this. This works extremely well. It's basically something you can open besides Swap Frog that puts you in a really good position because almost always when you set this, you'll have one the following turn. My opponents just generally don't out it. So with this, you have essentially 6 monsters you can open up with to potentially open up your plays. And even more so than that, late game, if you have access to 2 of these, then you have a free Toad or Rank 2 or Star Boy every turn, because as soon as Toad or Star Boy goes to the graveyard, you just search, or you just re-add one of the 2 back, and then you normal summon it, special summon the other one back, and just make like another Toad or Star Boy, and then when that one goes to the grave, you re-add this, and then you just do it again. And so it really adds steam late game, because Frogs late game struggle to make Toads because they start running out of resources to banish for the rodents. So it adds a lot of longevity to the deck, basically. I actually didn't draw it that much over the course of the tournament. A lot less than I drew swap. So it didn't do too much for me, but there was a few games where it came in clutch. And yeah, I think you should for sure run that. For hand traps, I've got 2 Ghost Ogres and 2 Effect Veilers. So I don't have Ash, so I didn't play it. I don't think Ash is significantly better than these in most situations, but there are some situations where it's better. But yeah, these are both good right now. I was happy with how they did at the tournament. I think Effect Veiler probably did more, but that's pretty much just based on the matchups I ended up playing. Those are both pretty matchup dependent as to how good they are. And then for my spells, I've got just one Monster Reborn and two Pot of Desires. So, Pot of Desires, I really don't like running 3. When you run 3, you draw Pot of Desires off Desires a lot more often. I ran a bunch of test hands, and I felt like 2 drew better, basically. But I think you should run it. It only hurt me once from banishing too much stuff off of Desires. All the other times I resolved it was fine. And the time it hurt me was because I had to activate both, because my first one got negated by an Ash, and I had to activate the second one because I just had no plays, and my opponent would have killed me the following turn if I didn't. So I had to just activate the second one and hope I get lucky. But I ended up banishing both my Ronins, all 3 of my Slimes, and 2 out of my 6 Frogs off of the 2 combined. But yeah, normally it's really good, and I would definitely highly recommend that in Frogs. Monster Reborn was great. It's good for making Toad on your first turn, and even later than that, it's good for just helping you get to a Toad when you only have access to one Frog or Toad, running Toadin or whatever normally. This just helps you get there to the second one. I don't think I ever revived my opponent's monster. It was never better to do that. Oh, also, you can also just late game revive Totally Awesome with this. And it doesn't have materials for special summoning from your deck, but it still has the ability to negate. Yeah, so that's pretty good. And then we've got, for the traps, we've got 3 Paleozoic Olenoids, and then we've got 3 Paleozoic Canadia. So these are the only Paleos I ran. I still like Dynamiscus, but I ended up not running it just because, mostly deck space. I needed to cut something to fit the Slimes in, and I feel like Slime is a much stronger monster than Dynamiscus. And yeah, I never felt like I was short on Paleos or monsters with only running 6. And these are the 2 better ones than Dynamiscus at the moment. Book of Moon isn't that good against links, but it still helps prevent them from making links before they get to that point. And then the MST Olenoids is definitely the best Paleo. This one was really clutch. And then we've got 3 Reckless Greeds. So Reckless is still really good, and yeah, it works really well in this deck. Just a trap you can activate whenever, and you have ways of getting to resources without drawing once you get set up, and this helps you get set up. For Floodgates now, we've got 3 Mistake, 2 Anti-Spell Fragrance, and then 1 Imperial Order. So, throughout the tournament, Anti-Spell, I didn't draw it that much, and it didn't really do anything. I didn't play too many matchups where it's the best. I only played Pendulum once. I played 8 different matchups throughout the tournament. So this didn't really come up. But in theory, it's still good. Mistake. I also didn't draw I didn't draw any of my Floodgates really that much, I guess. But Mistake, I did draw a few times, and it was really good. I drew this in a couple matchups, and it put in a lot of work. And then Imperial Order. This card was fine. I remember drawing it, and I don't remember it being terrible, but I don't remember it being super great either. But I know I've won games in the past using this in Paleo. So I still like it in here for sure. And then my last 2 non-counter traps, I've got 2 bottomless trap holes. So I like this as removal over something like Storming Mirror Force, because you get to lock them out before they get to use their effects a lot of the time, as long as the effect doesn't activate on summon. And it also came up where I used this during main phase 2 on something, and I wouldn't have been able to get rid of it with storming because they already stopped attacking the turn. So yeah, I like this as good generic removal. Throughout most of the tournament, it didn't do too much, but it did win me my last match in round 8. So that was pretty good. And then last up, we've got the Solemns. We've got 3 strikes, 1 warning, and 1 judgment. So these cards are all insane. They were really, really good. There's no reason not to run all 5 because they're the best traps currently. Even though you can't chain your Paleos to them, you gotta run them because they're the best traps. The other trap I was considering running in the main that I haven't mentioned yet would be Torrential, and I basically decided it wasn't as good as the stuff I was already running. You can't chain your Paleos to it because they die, but that's just the same as the Solemns, so that's not an immediate elimination of the card from consideration. But I didn't think it was quite as good as the ones I was running, basically. There's a lot of cards I wanted to run in here, so it's kind of hard to get it down to 40. Also, I should mention that I ran a lot of 2-ofs in my side deck, and to a lesser extent in my main deck. So I was only running 2 anti-spells, 2 bottomless, and you'll see once we get to the side, I ran a lot of 2-ofs in there. And the main reason for that is because I didn't have any testing for this deck, so I didn't know which cards would be best to run and which cards would not be best to run, so I just kind of played it safe with that. It's probably better with more testing to figure out which cards are best and to play 3 of those. But this worked fine the way I ran it. I don't think it's totally terrible to run 2-ofs, unlike what Glasgow says. That's actually, just to comment on that, when he makes fun of people for playing 2-ofs because you want to see it sometimes but not all the time, that's actually, that is a legitimate concern, because there are cards you want to see most games, but you don't want to see 2 of them. And I think that's a perfectly legitimate reason to run 2 of a card, because it's bad in doubles, but you do want to see it most games. And something like Desires, I think running 2 of it is often the correct choice because of that reason. Anyways, moving on to the side deck with all the 2-ofs. Some of these you probably do want to run 3 of. So we've got 2 Chaos Hunters and then 2 Gamma Seals for monsters. So Kaijus are pretty strong in this against like True Draco. You want to actually be able to get rid of their masterpiece, which you can't do with the main deck. So, and then this is water, so you can add it back to your hand with Toad. So it ends up being really good. I never actually drew it, so it didn't do anything because I didn't draw it. Chaos Hunter, so I did draw this against 60 card Dino, and I won because of this card. It's just ridiculous in that matchup. So yeah, that's pretty much all that card came up in this tournament for me, but it completely won a match by itself, so it ended up being worth playing. Then we've got 1 Regeki and 2 Cosmic Cyclones. So I ran Cosmic Cyclone over Heavy Storm Duster, the trap, specifically because of the mirror, where this card is a lot better in the mirror. But in other matchups, Heavy Storm Duster is better. But you don't really need spell trap removal in most other matchups besides the mirror, so I just ran this. And I did draw it against Stun, and it was actually really helpful because I was able to take out a strike and go for game. So it only came up that one time because I didn't really draw it besides that, but it helped me win that match. So was good in that sense. Regeki. Regeki is a card that I wanted to play in the main, and I also wanted to decide Dark Hole, but I didn't have space for this in the main or Dark Hole on the side. But Regeki is really strong in this deck because you can struggle to get rid of boards, and the fact that it's spelled means it gets around things like True Draco, because they'll make themselves immune to traps and monsters because that's what your deck does. But yeah, you want to side this in every time you're going second, which I did, and I drew it a bunch, and it put in work for sure. Definitely was a good card. And then we've got 3 Mind Crush. So I knew I wanted to run 3 of this because I wanted to have this going first in every matchup because evenly matched. And even besides evenly matched, this is really strong when you're going first against almost everything because almost everything searches. And I did manage to win a game and a match because of this card. I was playing against Invoked Mech Knights. He searched Alistair off Invocation, and I called Alistair with this, and he had 3 Alistairs in his hand. So I won that game because that was his entire hand. So I didn't actually get to use this against evenly matched ever. I only had 2 used on me throughout the tournament. 1 resolved, and I still ended up winning. And then 1 I negated with Toad, and I still ended up losing. And then continuing, we've got 2 Rivalry of Warlords. This should be 3 in retrospect because it was really good in a lot of matchups, and I've won a few times specifically because of this card. This is really good. You might even consider maining it. But there are a lot of matchups that are prominent where it does nothing, including True Draco, and Magicians doesn't care about this either because everything relevant in that deck is a spellcaster, including the extra deck. And Electromite, this is mainly good because it prevents people from going into the extra deck. And that came up a ton of times. And then we've got a 2-dimensional barrier. I never drew this, so it didn't do anything because I never drew it. I also didn't side it in that often because a lot of the decks were link-based or didn't even use the extra deck. I sided this in against Pendulum, but I only played Pendulum once, and I didn't draw it. And then Anti-Spell Fragrance, and it didn't really come up. I would still probably side the Anti-Spell Fragrance. Dimensional Barrier, it's still really good in theory, but I don't know if I would side it over some of the other stuff. And then other cards I was considering for the side, mainly just 3 of the cards I was running 2 of in there. The only other card that I was thinking about was Unending Nightmare for the Pendulum matchup, which I think would be good if you played more of it, but I didn't play that much. So then the extra deck, so we've got Lucina Token, which I use for the center card. Pretty awesome. And then we've got 3 Toads. You make Toad all the time. Toad is just the best card. It's almost always the correct play to make Toad instead of anything else. And yeah, I would probably play like 5 Toads if I could. I think 6 would be too much. But I would definitely play more. It did come up one game where I made 4 or 5 Toads, and I had to keep adding it back to my extra deck after it died, because I needed to. And then I'm playing 1 Opabinia and 1 Animalicaris. These do come up sometimes. I made this 0 times, and I made this once. And then for the generics, I'm only running Sky Cavalry Centauria and Cat Shark. So I cut out most of the generic X-Seeds because they don't ever do anything and you don't ever make them. I did actually make Cat Shark for the first time ever during the tournament. I probably could have won without it, but I was able to win in time on that turn only because of Cat Shark. So that was good. I probably could have thought of a way to win without it, but yeah, it definitely came up clutch. Sky Cavalry I've made in the past, which is why I didn't cut it. The other ones that I cut, I've never made before, including Digusto Phoenix and the two that negate effects that I can't remember their names. The main reason I kept this is actually because it's a water, and with the turns you activate the effect of Gradle Slime, you can only summon waters. So you're far more likely to be able to make this than the other ones, because usually you don't make stuff like this unless you have a lot of monsters, which you're more likely to have with slime. And then for links, I don't have most of the links, so I would run different links if I had more stuff. I've got 3 Mr. Boys, and then I have 1 Proxy Dragon and 1 Decode Talker. So I did actually make Decode Talker once because it had 2800 attack. So that's a little bit relevant, I guess. I never made Proxy Dragon. This would be better as an Underclock Taker, but I don't have an Underclock Taker because I haven't gotten any new cards, even though it's a really easy card to get. And then Miss Starboy, I made 2. I don't think you need 3. I would probably play a Borreload. And I would probably figure out a way to play a Saryuja. I would try to cut something. But definitely Borreload. Borreload would be great. I would maybe cut the Decode and the Starboy and the Proxy Dragon, and then replace these with the Underclock, Saryuja, and Borreload. I think that'd be better. But yeah, there's no way I'm paying for those really expensive links unless I'm playing something that actually needs them. This deck can get by without them. I would have made Borreload once. There was one point I know that I was thinking, if I had Borreload, I could make it here and it'd be really good. But it ended up not really mattering too much. Miss Starboy's really great. Usually you just make this plus Toad. It's a pretty standard play. So yeah, those are the links. And then to finish it up, we've got Synchros, because this Slime Jr. is actually a tuner. But it is a little bit restrictive, and you can't synchro with Ronin. But we've got 1 Bryonic, 1 Gradle Dragon, which I borrowed from Ked, so thank you, Ked, for that. And then 1 White Aura Whale. So they're all waters because you can only summon water monsters the turn you activate Slime Jr.'s effect, and you're usually only going to be synchro summoning when you do. So I never made these during the tournament, but I did during practice hands have a few times where I could have made them. So I thought it was worth playing over the X-Seeds that I never made. So Slime Jr., when its effect activates, you special summon a Slime Jr. from the grave. And then you special summon an Aqua from your hand. So you can special something like a swap. And then if you have access to summoning any dupe or swap, either by special summoning like a swap from your hand, or just having a dupe on the board from having it sit there, which happens sometimes. So if you have something like this, then you can go into your synchro plays. So you have to go into Bryonic first because these are both tuners. So you would synchro for Bryonic, use its effect if you need to, and then synchro these for one of these two. This nukes all attack position monsters. This destroys monsters equal to the materials. If you can manage to make it with 4, which is unlikely because you can't use Ronins, you could blow up 4 of your opponent's cards, in which case it's really strong. The Gradle Dragon. But usually you only get to pop 2, but that's still worth playing because you can pop back row while White Aura can't. And this is non-targeting also. So that's good against anything like Cosmo or whatever. So that's it. That's my deck profile. And at this point, I'm going to start going through a tournament report. So if anybody's interested in that, stick around for that. If you just want to see the deck list, that's all I've got for that. So round 1, I had to play against True Draco, unfortunately. So really bad luck. I did win the die roll. I won the die roll the first 7 rounds, And then the 8th round I tied before losing on the reroll. So I got extremely lucky. I was kind of disappointed that I didn't win all 8 because that would have been hilarious. I know the odds of that are really low. It's 1 in 2 to the 7th power. Well, getting a specific combination throughout all the 8 rounds is always 1 in 2 to the 8th power, just because that's how math works. But having that, the best combination is specifically really low odds. Getting like 4 wins is a lot higher because there's lots of different combinations you could have 4. There's only 8 different combinations where you could have 7 wins and 1 loss. So it would actually be 8 divided by 2 to the 8th power would be the odds. So you can do the math if you want. Anyways, so I went first. I got my traps set up for True Draco. I did not have access to Toad though. But so I ended up playing 2 games in this match. Between the 2 games, he activated 3 diagrams. I managed to destroy all 3 without him searching. But he still hard drew Masterpiece both games. Game 1, I had a Ghost Ogre to destroy his diagram, but he ended up just normal summoning Masterpiece, and I had a Solemn Judgment, luckily, so I was able to pay off my life points to get rid of it. But when he tribute summoned his Masterpiece, he sent it a spell and trap to the grave and used them to blow up some of my cards, so I didn't really have traps to stop his plays after that. And I really didn't have anything going for me that match, so he easily won it. And then game 2, I went first again, and I did open swap, so I was able to make a really good board with Toad plus traps. But he hard drew Masterpiece, even though I stopped 2 different diagrams this game. And he tribute summoned it by tributing a trap and a monster. One good way to counter this matchup is to prevent them from ever having a monster on board that they contribute, but I wasn't able to get his monster off the board before he could tribute summon. So yeah, that was unfortunate. And I didn't draw either of my outs, so I wasn't able to do anything to his Masterpiece. It was completely immune to anything I could do. I could out it potentially with stuff in my extra deck, but he could just destroy it because I don't have like a Bills that's immune, because unfortunately it's a dark, not a water. So yeah, I lost to that. True Draco is a really tough matchup, and it's pretty much just you lose and you can't do anything about it. That's how that matchup usually goes. So pretty bad start to the day for me. Just really unlucky getting True Draco in the first round. In round 2, I played against Trickstar ABC combination. I didn't really get to see too much of his deck, but I think it's basically just running the minimum Trickstar engine and the minimum ABC engine plus traps. That's what it looked like from what I could see. So, game 1, I go first, obviously. And I do open Slime, so I just set that and traps, and that manages to stick on the board pretty well. And I do have a strike, which I use on his Trickstar Searcher, because that's one of the better ways to just shut down their turn, prevent them from burning you. The life points you pay is generally going to be less than the life points you get burned. Though this deck doesn't really search or add cards from the deck to the hand that much, so you don't get burned too much compared to other decks. So I think this is actually a pretty strong matchup, Trickstar, for the Frog deck. It would seem that way, at least. So the strike totally stops his turn, and then on my turn, I'm able to make both a Miss Starboy and Totally Awesome. So I open up pretty good, and with both of those, I have pretty much total control of the board. I think my Toad just sticks the whole game, and I end up winning pretty handily. Game 2, he goes first, and luckily I opened Veiler for his Trickstar Searcher, so that shuts down his plays, and without the search, he has a totally bricked hand. he ends up not being able to do anything this game, much less even the first game where I was in control pretty much the whole way through. And on my turn, I opened up a swap plus a monster reborn, so I'm able to make Toad on my first turn. And then my second turn, I'm able to go into Miss Starboy with the Toad plus another Toad underneath it. I do that a lot actually, where I use a Toad as one of the materials from a Starboy and then make a new second Toad, just so I have a little bit more board presence. And yeah, I win that one really easily. So that was a pretty easy match. And then round 3, I end up going against World Chalice. So go first, obviously. And I had a Canadia. So he ends up going Shine Ball, Transmodify into Venus. And then I use Canadia on it before it can use its effect, because I know that Venus equals Link 4, and World Chalice is all about linking into monsters like crazy, so I didn't want him to get any Link plays off, basically. I had opened a little bit slow. I think I had one monster that I set, and I'm pretty sure. A lot of times, I opened up just a monster that I set with 2000 defense, my opponent would attack into it, and then nothing would happen, because I had more defense than they had attack. That happened a lot. And some of my opponents didn't even realize that, like, so the first time, you don't know what I'm playing. But then after that, you know I'm playing. So you know my monster's 2000 defense if they're set. They still kept attacking into them. So I thought that was a little odd. So yeah, anyways, I did that for the first one. And then his next turn, he flip summoned it. And tried to use the effect. And I Veilered it. So stop him again. I had the Veiler for the first time also, but I did it in this order because if you did it the other way, you can't stop him the second turn with Canadia, because he could just flip summon himself because it wasn't summoned that turn. So yeah, that was the correct order to play those in my opinion. And the following turn, I'm able to make a Toad using my Canadia. So I'm in pretty good position with my Toad plus traps. He ends up summoning a bunch of monsters the following turn, and I just let most of them go through because I have a strike, and I know what is coming. So he ends up making Skull Dread with 4 of his monsters, and I just strike it, and that's it. He had nothing left at that point. And then game 2, he bricks. He ends up drawing Brilliance and Garnet. And he only played 1 Garnet apparently, and he T-sets those 2. And I have a really weird hand. I ended up drawing 4 of my Paleos, 2 of each of these. So I am able to stop his play with Canadia. So he ends up flip summoning the Garnet that he set, and then normal summoning a Damage Juggler. So I set the Garnet specifically because that was the normal monster, and I know that there is a Link that requires 1 normal monster, so I thought that he would have less options if I did that, essentially. So he passes when I do that, and then on my turn, I ended up using both of the Olenites during the end phase. One of them hit a Cosmic Cyclone, and then the other one hit his set Brilliant Fusion. So then since I used these and I got a bunch of monsters off of them, I'm able to summon a bunch of things. I summon a Miss Starboy and then 2 Toads connected to it. And with his brick hand, this is just way too much. And so I end up with a pretty easy win because I still have 1 Canadia left sets in addition to those. So there's not really anything he can do. I ended up winning that game in only 20 minutes because he opened up poorly, and I just had the answers for everything. So that was pretty nice because I was able to get some food for lunch. And then in round 4, I ended up playing against 60 card Dino. So game 1, I go first. I opened really good. I don't really remember too much about this game because game 2 ended up taking so long and it was much more memorable. But I remember I managed to stop his Scorpio Protoplant and all 3 of his Brilliant Fusions over 3 turns. I stopped all 4 of those cards from resolving. So I was able to get a easy win with none of his cards going off, essentially, because I just stop all of his play openers. Game 2, he goes first, and he opens Grass, mills 18, because he already took 2 cards off his deck from something, I don't remember what. Oh, Brilliant Fusion. He used Brilliant Fusion beforehand, yeah. So he activated Brilliant Fusion, I summoned my Chaos Hunter that I sided in, and he used Grass, milled 18 cards, but he couldn't actually do anything because all of his grave plays involved banishing things. So Chaos Hunter stopped him from activating anything, really. And then on my turn, I had a Rivalry in my opening hand, so I was able to set that and activate it. So with both of these together, there's absolutely nothing he could do for the longest time. Normally he would have been able to go into the extra deck to out Chaos Hunter, but this stopped him from making anything in his extra deck because he, for the most part, only had Warriors out, and he didn't have any anything in his extra deck that was Warriors. So we just sat on this for a really long time. Both of us almost deck out, actually, because I can't draw my second Chaos Hunter, which means I can't summon another monster, and that means I can only kill one thing per turn with this Chaos Hunter, and it takes a really long time for me to get opportunities where he has an open board where I can do damage. Eventually, I managed to get him down to 1,500 life points just by attacking with Chaos Hunter. But at that point, he finally draws his third snow. 2 of them are in his grave, so he can't summon them. The third one, he normal summons to set the Chaos Hunter. So at this point, he can summon his other snows. So he summons the second one, and I activate Chaos Hunter. He can't book this because its effect is activating in the hand, and it won't resolve until after the chain in response to the summon of the snow. But he has his other snow engraved, so he chains that one to the effect of Chaos Hunter. So that one summons itself, and then Chaos Hunter summons itself, and then he activates the effect of his third snow and books that one too. So at this point, he can banish things freely, which is a problem for me, and Rivalry is still up though, so he can only summon spellcasters. So he kills both of these with his snows, does a little bit of damage. I'm down to 4150 because I paid 2,000 at one point. I paid 2,000 on a Monster Reborn targeting one of his snows in grave. That was what happened because I knew that was an out, and then I didn't have a way to stop the normal summon, which happened a few turns afterwards. So I'm at 4150. He's at 1,500. And we're in time at this point because it just took so long for anything to happen in this game. So on my turn, I have a ton of monsters available because it's been so long. So I end up making a Miss Starboy plus a Toad, and I don't attack because I don't have any way to game him over the snows. So I sit on these guys, plus a few backup traps. I still have this up. So before he can do anything, he needs to get rid of his snows so he can summon a different type. So he tries to crash the snows to kill them into Miss Starboy. And I booked 2 of them because I don't want him to have them engraved to summon up, basically, is what I'm thinking. So he crashes them into Miss Starboy, one of them into Miss Starboy, and then he's got 2 set off of the Canadian. He ends up summoning what's it called? The new dinosaur from the new pack. I can't remember its name, but it's negates spell and traps, that one. So he special summons that, and then normal summons the Searcher Oviraptor, and then special summons the big boss Superconductor Tyranno. But I have a Judgment set, and I saved that for the Tyranno because that was the only one that would be an issue for me. I wasn't planning on activating any traps anymore at this point, so the new one didn't matter. So yeah, that stops his turn at that point. After the Judgment, I'm down to 2075 compared to his 1400 because he crashed snow twice. And then my turn, I make a Cat Shark, and I double Totally Awesome's attack, and I attack over his Overraptor in attack mode. And this is 44 compared to 18, so that's more than 1400 damage. So yeah, that's the Cat Shark coming in for game there. So that took a really long time. I was turn 2 of time where I ended up finally getting the win. So then in round 5, I played against Mech Knight Invoked. I played against this guy before. He's a really good player. And so I obviously went first, and I activated a Desires, but he had an Ash. So he was able to stop that from resolving turn 1. And on his turn, I had a mistake, which pretty much shut down his plays because he was playing Invoked, and they search a lot. They need to do most of their plays. And then on my next turn, I had really no follow-up at all. I couldn't do anything, so I decided to activate the other Desires that I opened with, even though I was banishing 20 cards total. But I ended up not really drawing anything, and I banished all of my monsters almost between the two of them. So I was in a really bad position, and then during the end phase, he activated Scapegoat, and he made a huge board just using Scapegoat into link monsters. And so on that turn, I scooped before I revealed the deck that I was playing. Though it was obvious I was playing something with traps, I wasn't necessarily playing frogs. I could have been playing some other trap-heavy deck at that point. And so game 2, I go first, and so I opened up with 2 mistakes, and I activate it when he uses his field spell to search for Alistair, or to try to search for Alistair, but he chains a Cosmic Cyclone to banish it, so I chained the other mistake, and he chains the second Cosmic Cyclone. So they both get banished, and he gets his search off. It's pretty crazy. I opened with 2 of these, and he opened with 2 Cosmic Cyclones. Luckily, though, I also had a Mind Crush set, so he added the Alistair to hand, and I called it with Mind Crush, and he happened to have 3 Alistairs in his hand, so he discarded all 3, only had 1 card left, so I went on to win that game really easily because he had just no resources. And then, so game 3, he ends up having a Scapegoat that he activates on the end phase of my first turn. But luckily, I have a Rivalry set, and I shotgun activate that during his draw phase. So he's locked into Beast monsters. He does make a Mystis Radiant because that is a beast, but that's the only thing he can make. And it only makes 1, so I think he didn't have 2 in his extra deck. So he ends up crashing all of his monsters into my monsters after I eventually make a board. So he can try to summon something else, but even with not being locked into beasts, he still can't really do anything. Being only able to use the monsters he already has to make something else. And to make it even harder for him, I activate a mistake when he tries to search. And then we eventually get to a point where he tries to use Econ Take on my Toad to try to force through something. But I chained Imperial Order to his Econ that I just drew the turn before. And I end up winning. Basically, due to a large part due to Slime Jr. making Toad after Toad, because he does end up being able to take out the first couple of Toads, but eventually I get through because he can't really do much with all my Floodgates, and the Floodgates aren't actually affecting me at all. So that one I ended up winning mostly due to my Floodgates. So in round 6, I ended up playing against Pendulum Magicians, the new Mythical Beast cards, which I think is probably pretty standard at this point, but this is the very first time I ever played against it. I had never seen these cards before. I was very prepared going to the tournament, obviously. So game 1, I went first, but I didn't have too strong of an opening. It wasn't terrible either, but it was in the middle. And she ended up opening up really well and just completely blowing me out. And I got destroyed. game 1 basically. So then game 2, I went first again. I opened really well. I opened up with Toad and Miss Starboy, and then I also had a Canadia and Bottomless to back them up. But even with that board, she was able to break through it and clear out both my monsters. I ended up having to burn the Toad Negate on an evenly matched. And then I ended up going through both my traps also. But on my next turn, I was able to recover a little bit and make Animal Icarus, which I felt was pretty strong, considering I had her down to only her Pendulum Scales. At that point, she had to burn through most of her cards, clearing my board. She had some stuff she could Pendulum Summon in her extra deck, but she could only Pendulum Summon one, obviously, with the new rules. But unfortunately for me, she top decked Humongous the Kaiju, so I just tributed this, and I had nothing, and that was pretty. It was game from that point. So yeah, I just totally got blown out that match. She ended up getting 8th place, so yeah, she was a good player, and that's probably the best deck based off of what I saw in that matchup. It looked really strong. This was, as far as I could tell, my only opponent who ended up top 32 besides me, but there were a lot of other opponents who ended up X3 or with the same record as me. I know my guy in the round 7 ended up with the same record as me. I did have good tiebreakers, I think, partly because of her, and then also I think a lot of my opponents just barely missed out on top 32, which all put together ended up as a good tiebreaker. So then round 7 ended up being pretty crazy. So I go first again. This is my 7th die roll win in a row at this point. So game 1 ends up taking forever. It's an extremely grindy back and forth matchup. So I'm playing against the Teller Knights of all decks, which I was not expecting at all. And I feel like it is a really strong matchup generally speaking, but he was drawing very good traps, and it was making it very difficult for me to play. So he ends up having a Solemn Strike for the first toad I make, and then a Solemn Warning for the second toad I make. So I have difficulty actually getting any plays through. And then I do make another one that does not get Solemn, but this one gets Fiendished. So that's a problem because I can still negate something by sending itself while it's Fiendished, but I can't special summon the frog from my deck. So I had a really tough time getting my frogs in my grave or on the field because I was never able to actually special summon a frog from the deck with Totally during game 1 for the entire game. I wasn't able to do that. So it was really tough to get access to monsters consistently. So that third one gets Fiendished, and he outs it eventually. And I summoned a 4th one because I added it back to the extra deck with itself. And then the 4th one also gets Fiendished. So I can't really get a foothold because it's too hard to get resources, basically. And so our traps kind of counteract each other. Eventually he gets the foothold because he does have his monsters, and he has a Call of the Haunted and Oasis and stuff like that. I don't remember which. I know he was playing both. I don't remember if he saw one or the other game 1, because they do essentially the same thing. So eventually, yeah, he got game 1, and that took forever. It was probably like a 30-minute game 1, almost 30 minutes at least. And then game 2, I have a pretty good opening. I make a Toad, but he has a Kaiju for that, and then he ends up making Trevere to bounce the Kaiju back to his hand. So then the next turn when I make Toad, he'll be able to Kaiju it again, which is kind of a problem. And this game is also really back and forth. I don't remember too much about this game, detail-wise, except for the end. So eventually it gets to a point where he outs the Toad through battle phase, and then main phase 2, I can see that he's going to go for a Trevere play. he hasn't used his normal summon this turn. He activates a call to bring back Altair to bring back Deneb. Deneb searches a Sirius, so I could tell he's going to normal summon the Sirius to make Trevere, which would be a huge problem because I have Slime Jr. in my hand, which I want to summon, and if I can't actually summon this, then I won't be able to make anything next turn, because I won't be able to. I don't have like Ronin's engraved that I can use for that, but I do have one Paleo engrave, luckily, and so what I do is I activate Mind Crush to call Sirius, so that way he can't actually summon Trevere. And I chain my Paleo to bring my Paleo, because it's main phase 2 and I don't have to worry about it being killed in battle. And at this point we go into time, so this is turn 0. And then he decides to use his 2 materials to make Baguska in defense mode. And his other monster, he already has 1 Underclock Taker that was previously on the field that he made earlier. And so he ends his turn like that. And at this point, life point wise, we're both tied. We both have 4,200 life points. Yeah, we ended up with the same amount somehow. So my turn, I can't use my effects because of Baguska, but luckily I already have the monster on board, so I can just summon Slime. And then I have 2 monsters to make Miss Starboy. And this is a link, so it can't be switched to defense mode, luckily. So I'm able to attack over his Underclock with Miss Starboy to do 900 damage to put me just up. And so my opponent then has a few turns to try to get ahead, but he can't actually draw anything that's playable to help him out. I remember he drew like a Cosmic, he drew the Telenova Alpha, which was dead, and then he drew a trap that didn't clear an already established board. It was something like a Bottomless or a Solemn or maybe a Mind Crush. I remember it was a trap that wasn't very helpful. So that was all he drew. So the only damage he could actually do to me was attacking over my Miss Starboy with Baguska by switching it to attack mode. But he didn't actually do that until... well, he could have done it his last turn, but he didn't actually do it at all because... I think the reason he didn't do it earlier is if his Baguska was in attack mode instead of defense, then he would have... I would have been able to use my Starboy to add a Cradle Slime from my grave to my hand, and then get its effect off, and then get over him with a Toad, because Baguska only has 21 attack compared to Toad's 22. So the most he could do was 200 damage, and that wasn't as much as 900, so I won that barely. So that was game 2, and he won game 1, so we ended up with a tie. So we were both on the bubble, and we needed to win the next round to top. I'll let you know that my opponent did win round 8, but did not get a top 32. I guess it's not technically a top. He did not get his invite for getting in the top 32 due to not having as good tiebreakers. Now in round 8, I end up losing the die roll for the very first time during the tournament. So I was pretty sad about that. And I end up playing against anti-meta stun with that new 2000 attack stun monster. It's like Inspect something. I don't remember the name. He played that, Thunder King, Fossil Dyna, and Kaiku, which I'm pretty sure the Kaiku was sided in. I saw it starting game 2. And he played those with the standard like Moon Mirror Shield and a bunch of traps. So basically that deck. Luckily, I think Frog is better able to handle that than most meta decks because I run so many traps also. So I was able to handle it at least decently. So game 1, he opens up Thunder King plus traps. Thunder King, the searching effect doesn't matter, but the being able to negate my extra deck summons is a problem. So I ended up sitting on Dupe Frog for a while. but I couldn't really get anything going, and he couldn't get over it either because I had too much defense. But eventually he drew into a Moon Mirror Shield, and he was able to attack over it. And at that point, he already had the new card, Inspector Border, out, and that caused a lot of problems, even more so than Thunder King. And with both out together, I knew I had no chance to recover, so I ended up scooping. That game was pretty quick. Because, yeah, it went south for me really quickly, so I ended up scooping pretty early. So, game 2, he really didn't seem to draw anything because he kind of passed without doing anything for a really long time. Like, honestly, it was like 5+ turns with him not doing anything. Which was lucky for me because I used a Reckless to try to get myself going, and I drew nothing off the Reckless. So I had to wait 2 turns with Reckless, and I couldn't do anything either until it was over and I drew something. So we ended up kind of just passing back and forth, and neither of us doing anything. I had an Imperial Order that I had used to stop him from drawing cards, and so I ended up actually just using an Olenoids on my Imperial Order so I didn't burn myself to death. I used up about half of my life points with Imperial Order because it burns through it really quickly. And I am able to get a Toad out at some point this game. And so once I have my Toad out, I have a few traps. That's when he seems to draw into the cards he needs because he decides to start doing stuff. He did a little bit before then. He would activate a few cards, set a few traps. I think he summoned probably a Kaiku or something, but he was doing not very much in terms of impact on the game. So, but once I have my Toad out, he does try to do stuff. He baits it out with Swords of Concealing Light, which I negate, and then activates it evenly, and I decide to just keep my Toad. He didn't have any cards on the board at that point. I'm pretty sure he drew the evenly early because he was purposefully not playing very many cards this game. And then the Toad is the only card left I have, and it's used its effect, so he uses his own Regeki on it, so it takes it off the board. And then he normal summons the Inspector Border, and sets a few back rows. But luckily for me, I have a Regeki of my own that I had been saving since the second turn of the game. I remember drawing this on the second turn, and I was just saving it for when I needed it, and I needed it here because with his Inspector Border gone, I was able to make another Toad, and he didn't have a trap to stop me from summoning it, and he was really low on resources after his play the previous turn, I mean. So I was able to win it from there with the Toad. And game 2 took a really long time, took about 30 minutes, so we only have about 5 minutes left at this point. It took so long mostly just because we were passing back and forth and just making small plays, not having anything huge happen. So game 3, he lets me go first, which I found weird. Luckily, I wasn't siding anything that really needed me to be going second. My deck is better going first, even when I have it sided for going second. With me going first, I'm free to make Toad plus Miss Starboy, and I don't have it. He doesn't have any traps that can stop me. And on his turn, he ends up using Concealing again. Luckily, this time I have an Olenoid set that I can just chain, so I don't have to burn my Toad negate on it, which was great because he had Regeki again, and he uses that to bait out my Toad effect, so I obviously negate it and set his Regeki, which is a card that's in this matchup is likely to be very useful to have. And with my Toad negate baited out, he activates a Demise to try to draw into a card that would help. But luckily for me, he draws 2 monster cards off of the Demise, which I could tell because he discarded them during the end phase. And so during his end phase, he ends with Kaiku. summoned with a Moon Mirror Shield equipped, and then 2 set strikes, which I don't know yet, but I find out that there are strikes through the course of this game. This is actually like the 4th turn, I think, of the game, and I had done some damage on the 3rd turn. Yes. So, yeah, okay, I'm remembering it now a little bit better. So, turn 2, he's normal summoned an Inspector Border, which I used a Bottomless on, which was pretty nice that I had that ready to go. And then turn 3, I did damage. And then all that stuff that just happened, that was his turn, which was turn 4 of the game. So then my turn 5, which is also turn 2 of time, by the way, because we were really low on time when we started this game. So I start my turn, activate Toad's effect to special a frog, and he uses one of his strikes on that to destroy it. At this point, he only has 1 set, and I have a Galaxy Cyclone in my hand, so I just burn it on his other strike. And then I activate a Regeki, destroy... Oh, the Mistar Boy is gone because I don't remember why, actually, but he did something. Got rid of my Mistar Boy. Pretty sure. Yeah, for sure, because I didn't have any monsters at this point. So I used Regeki on his Kaiku, so he's got an open board, no cards left in his hand, and so I activate a set Reckless Greed so that I'm able to chain my Olenoids to special summon it from my grave, and then I normal summon a frog. I think it was something like Dupe. It wasn't Swap Frog, so it could have been Ronin. So I normal summon one of those, so that I'm able to overlay for another Toad, and he has less than 2200 life points, so I attack for game. And so I was able to win that, and that puts me up to 5-2-1, and on tiebreakers, I got 32nd place. So I'm pretty happy about that. It was pretty interesting tournament, actually. I had a few good matches, and I ended up playing against a different deck every single round, and it was almost all meta decks. So it was pretty fun to play. I guess that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed it, and if you did, be sure to check out some other stuff.